The elites are still elites. That has not changed. You still have kings who view themselves as the embodiment of their nation, and many of the people view them that way as well. If you recall when I talked about Henry VIII, I talked about this idea of the king as being equal to the country in many ways, and people believing that the king was blessed with certain special gifts and abilities by God when he became king, almost as if the king was the caretaker of the country, and whatever was good for the king, by extension, was good for the country as a whole. Those ideas have not gone away or changed. In the 1700s, if anything else, they've grown stronger and been reinforced by the kings themselves. Many kings genuinely believe that they are God's gift to their country, and I don't mean that sarcastically. They really genuinely believe that God put them on earth as a present to the people of their country, and that they are supposed to look after and preserve the good of their country. They believe the idea that they are the embodiment of their nation, and they believe that they deserve the best of everything, because the best of everything for them as a king equals the best of everything for their country. One of the best examples of this idea is Louis XIV, the King of France at this point in history. Now, Louis considers himself to be God's gift to his country. Well, I mean, those legs are God's gift to something, I'll tell you that. In all fairness, he is wearing heels, though, and heels always make your calves look better, so... Now, seriously, though, Louis really does genuinely believe that he is superior to everyone else, that he is God's gift to his country. In fact, he actually calls himself the light of his people, and he often refers to himself throughout his life as the Sun King, associating himself with the ancient Greek god Apollo. Louis genuinely believes this. This is not just, well, it is his ego, but it's not just some ridiculous idea. Louis genuinely believes that he is God's gift to his nation. Louis genuinely believes in his own superiority. And Louis genuinely believes that it is his duty as king, as this naturally superior being, to look out for the country of France. He really genuinely believes that he must do what is good for France, because the people of his country, the ordinary people, are far too stupid to figure this out on their own. So Louis takes his job as king quite seriously. He is the Sun King, after all, the light of his nation. And Louis undertakes a variety of different projects. He actually starts 2 wars, for better or for worse. He believes it's the right choice. He makes some major economic and trade changes. And Louis genuinely believes he's working very hard to do what is best for France, because he, of course, as the Sun King, knows what's best for everyone else. The problem is that Louis's court, all of the nobles that surround Louis, do not have that same work ethic, if you will. They do not feel the same push to take care of the country. They do not feel they are the embodiment of their nation. It's the king's job. Instead, most of the nobles around Louis spend their time gossiping, blackmailing each other, backstabbing, and having a series of affairs which they use to blackmail each other. They all come to Louis and try to social climb and gossip and backstab each other to him, and Louis gets really fed up with this. Like I said, he genuinely believes he's trying to do something good for his country. He takes his job very seriously. Now, I'm not affirming that he's doing a great job. I'm just saying he believes that this is what is right. He gets very upset and frustrated with all these nobles who seem to be so involved with social life and blackmail and so on, that Louis decides he needs to get better control over his court. In order to get better control so that he can concentrate on being the light of his country, the Sun King, Louis he seizes over 20,000 acres of land in France and builds a massive new palace where he moves his entire court, all of the nobility, to one location so he can keep track of them. This palace that he builds is called the Palace of Versailles. Now, the palace, just Louis's palace, actually is located on 19,768 square acres of ground. That is crazy. If you want a sense of scale, You live in Florida, most of you. So if you've ever seen like a satellite image, an overhead image of Walt Disney World property, all of Walt Disney World, all the resorts, all the undeveloped land, everything, Versailles is a third the size of Walt Disney World property, just for the king and for his court. On this land, Louis builds a massive palace with over 700 rooms, more than 2,000 windows, because we're in a time period where you don't have central heat and air. It has over 1,250 chimneys. This is a massive structure designed so that Louis, the Sun King, can live in ultimate comfort and luxury, and he can keep his court close. He can manage them. Basically, he can control his court so that he can focus on running the country as his right as an enlightened despot and the Sun King, the leader of his country and the light of his people. Now, everything in the Palace of Versailles is designed so that it is beautiful and convenient and luxurious for the king, because in the mind not only of Louis, but of the people of the country of France at this point, what is good for the king is good for the country. They genuinely view the king as the embodiment of their nation. So if the king has every luxury, their country is set up for success. So while people in the city of Paris are walking sometimes more than a mile to get clean water from a fountain and carrying that clean water home in buckets, when Louis walks out the back door of his Palace of Versailles, he sees this. The gardens of Versailles are beautiful and carefully landscaped. The fountains and gardens outside of the back of the palace contain more than 300 statues and 1,400 fountains. When Louis walks out the back door of his palace, Sun King, light of his people, those fountains all start because the world needs to be beautiful and pleasant for the king. To run those fountains for a single hour takes 1,600,000 gallons of water. I mean, of course, all of this exists today. See photograph. But to this day, if you go visit Versailles, those fountains out back run only 2 to 3 hours a week. Why? Because we have the good common sense to know that, oh my gosh, this is wasteful. We run them briefly in order to make sure that the plumbing still works. But in Louis's time, they don't worry about wasteful. This is what is good and pleasant for the king, who is the embodiment of the country. He is the enlightened one, the Sun King. And therefore everything must be beautiful and peaceful so that he can use his special gifts to guide the country the right way, while the ordinary people are too stupid to do that, and the king's job is to look after everyone. Now, Louis takes this very seriously. Yes, I'm kind of poking fun of this whole idea, but Louis genuinely believes that he is the light of his country. He keeps calling himself, as I mentioned, the Sun King, and in order to emphasize this, in order to exemplify this, Louis designs parts of the Palace of Versailles to focus on the sunlight, because he is, of course, the Sun King. One of the most outrageous examples of that, when Louis wakes up in the morning in his bedroom, he goes through his morning ritual. Again, this is part of him keeping control over the nobility. He has a group of people who all have certain jobs and helping him get ready for his day. And after he's gotten ready for his day, then Louis has to walk from his bedroom to his throne room, where he's going to conduct the business of the kingship for the day. So Louis gets up in the morning, gets ready in his bedroom, and walks down a hallway to the throne room where he's going to do his work for the day. Because Louis is the Sun King, he specifically has this hallway between his bedroom and his throne room designed so that one side of the hallway faces toward the east. That was relevant because, of course, he's the Sun King. The sun rises in the east. So the idea is, as Louis walks through this hallway in the morning, he, the Sun King, will walk through this bright sunlight first thing in the morning. Louis in this hallway has 17 floor-to-ceiling windows installed facing east to let in the sunlight. To amplify that sunlight, he's the Sun King, he has 17 floor-to-ceiling mirrors installed opposite the windows to reflect the morning sunlight. He calls this space the Hall of Mirrors. So this is between his bedroom and his throne room. 17 floor-to-ceiling windows, 17 floor-to-ceiling mirrors. But wait, he doesn't just leave it there. He also installs 12-foot-tall golden-plated candlesticks with crystal chandeliers on the ceiling, crystal candle holders on top of the candlesticks, the entire ceiling covered in painted scenes from Greek mythology, interspersed with relief carving, also plated in gold. The entire purpose of this Hall of Mirrors is for Louis, as an enlightened despot, to walk from his bedroom to his throne room. And he doesn't mind spending taxpayer money on this. He doesn't mind blowing this much cash because he deserves this, because he is the Sun King and the light of his people. And this is what he needs to have because he has the responsibility of guiding his country because he's the only one who knows what's good for the country. Everyone else is stupid. Now, the whole palace looks like this. I mean, this is one of the most outrageous examples because it's all set in one hallway. But the entire Palace of Versailles has this completely over-the-top decoration. There's actually a word for this completely over-the-top style that is beloved by the nobility in the late 1600s and 1700s. The artistic word for this highly decorated, elaborate style is Rococo. Rococo, actually, is focused on that elaborate decoration. It is beloved of the wealthy and powerful, and everything in Rococo art is decorated. I mean, the Hall of Mirrors, everything except the floor is basically decorated. It, however, focuses also on a sense of softness. It uses pastel colors, nothing too bright. Most Rococo paintings, the artwork, is actually in a soft focus. Again, this is being purchased. This is being created for the wealthy and powerful. And they don't live in the same world that ordinary people do. Ordinary people, people who work for a living, live in a world of harsh reality. They live in a world of drama. Basically, for them, bright colors stand out. They reflect symbolism. For Rococo, for these wealthy and powerful people, everything needs to be soft, gentle, graceful. So you're going to get really elaborate over-the-top decoration. Everything is going to be pastel colors, soft focus, gentle, nothing too traumatic. And the primary focus of Rococo art is going to be on love. The wealthy and powerful, the nobility of this time, are actually obsessed with love, mostly because they are so rich. That sounds so ridiculous, but these people are rich enough to buy anything they want. I mean, they can buy a musician. They can have music on demand in a time with no recording equipment. They can purchase land. They can purchase buildings. But the one thing they can't buy love. They can buy sex, but they can't buy love. So their obsession, the thing that they put in their artwork, the thing that fills Rococo, is the one thing they can't buy, their obsession, and that is love. Rococo art focuses on grace and prettiness above everything. It is this view of the world through a rose-colored filter. Everything is decorated elaborately. It is all soft focus and pastel colors. It dreams of this love, this perfect ideal love, and it basically runs everything through a softening filter. Everything is about grace and prettiness. Nothing is harsh. Nothing is unpleasant. They see their entire world through their experience, which is this unrealistic, idealistic, protected filter that sees the world as graceful, pretty, and soft. You see that here in a painting that is known by a number of different titles. Sometimes it's called Departure from Cythera, sometimes it's called Journey to Cythera, sometimes it's called Arrival at Cythera, but it's always Cythera, something. Cythera is actually a real place. It is an island in the Mediterranean. Excuse me. In mythology, Cythera was always associated in Greek and Roman mythology with Aphrodite or Venus, the goddess of love and fertility. If you guys recall Botticelli's Birth of Venus, it was this image of Venus, and she just risen from the ocean of foam and snagged herself a clamshell, and she was being blown into shore by the west wind. In that myth, in that story, the island where Venus lands is the island of Cythera. In mythology, this island is dedicated to honoring the goddess of love and fertility. Supposedly, it's the first places that roses ever bloomed. And during this time period, late 1600s, early 1700s, young couples, young lovers, actually took cruises to Cythera. Today, we take cruises to the Bahamas. They took cruises to Cythera, all right? So, These groups, these young couples would take a ship, they would journey to Cythera, and while there, they would spend their time honoring the goddess of love. And I will totally leave it up to you guys to figure out what that means. Now, this picture by an artist named Watteau depicts one of these boatloads of young people. And we don't know whether they're supposed to be arriving or leaving. That's why it's, arrival at Cythera, departure from Cythera, journey to Cythera. We don't know. What we do know is that the painting is just so Rococo. It is this elaborate image. Look at the clothing these people are wearing. This is not intended for outdoors. I mean, most people do not wear their salmon silk suit to go camping, all right? Everything is very pastel colored and soft focus. If you look in the background, it's actually very difficult to see where the trees turn into clouds, turns into sky. Everything is run through this very soft filter. It's almost dream-like. It's this idea of everything being seen through these wealthy rose-colored idealistic glasses. It focuses on love. There's a sculpture of Aphrodite or Venus over here covered in roses. So again, there's that callback to the goddess of love and fertility. There are little baby cupids like spattered everywhere. Some of them do have clothes like this little guy over here. There's an entire like a little tornado of them going up in the air over here. Whee! All right. They're everywhere as you look around. This one is actually pulling on the guy's staff from this young couple. There are so many jokes there. These basic images are all about this ideal of love, but it's all done through this very soft focus, grace, prettiness above all, pastel colors, and this elaborate sense of decoration, the elaborate clothing. It's all this idea of Rococo that views the world through this soft, unrealistic filter of people who have never had to struggle. They're living in this rarefied, wealthy, protected world. In fact, these wealthy people who love Rococo art have no idea what it is like for ordinary people. It's not this that they're blocking it out, they're being cruel. They genuinely have no idea. When they paint pictures of ordinary people, quote unquote, they are so painfully unrealistic. For example, this is actually a painting by an artist named Thomas Gainsborough entitled Haymaker and Sleeping Girl. The painting is supposed to be of a quote-unquote ordinary couple. The guy in the background has supposedly been out in the fields working and baling hay all day. I have issues with that. I mean, I don't look that put together after I've mowed the lawn on a lawnmower all day. I mean, forget working in the fields. And yet he's this very elegantly dressed, very clean, well put together guy. In the foreground is a female, girlfriend, wife. Supposedly she's been out working in the garden all day, but she's beautifully dressed, incredibly clean, and it's kind of weird because she appears to be a redhead, but her skin is not at all sunburnt. She's like perfect and she has time to take a nap. If you asked one of these wealthy and powerful individuals, King Louis, his court, what life was like for ordinary people, this is what they would have described to you. For them, they have never even encountered ordinary people up close. They might have seen them from a distance or from a carriage. To them, ordinary people, common people, are wholesome. They live a simple life. Deep sigh, I wish my life were like theirs. They have it so much easier. We have so much responsibility. It's so hard. They see them as wholesome. They see them as innocent. They don't have the burden of education, rulership. They don't have all these horrible struggles. This is completely unrealistic, of course. I mean, this is ridiculous and stupid, and it's going to come back to bite them. I mean, this is a complete disconnect between the 1%, the wealthy and powerful, the people who live in places like the Palace of Versailles in luxury with servants to attend to their every need, and the way that real people live in the day-to-day world. There is a lack of understanding what life is like for ordinary people. And when enlightened despots like Louis XIV make, quote unquote, the wise decisions because they know what is best for their people, they are often making terrible decisions, not because they're cruel, not because they're trying to be wrong, but because they genuinely do not understand what life is like. And they genuinely believe that these sweet, wholesome, innocent people are getting the benefit of their wisdom. That is not accurate. and things are going to fall apart. Part of the problem, though, as I said, is the distance between the 1% and the 99% here. Most wealthy, powerful nobility do not commonly encounter ordinary people, and they especially do not encounter troublemakers. Troublemakers stay far away or are sent far away, which lets me introduce something that you all know about, but we haven't really talked about it because you know about it. Welcome to the New World. This should look vaguely familiar to you. You live here. This is referred to the Europeans as the New World. Now, of course, duh, it actually isn't new in any sense. It's been there as long as any other continent's been there. However, the Europeans didn't know it was here until it got in their way and they ran into it. So they refer to it as the quote-unquote New World. You all know, I did not even talk about it, because you all know that in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. You know that the New World was officially discovered. We believe it was discovered before that. The Americas were officially discovered when Christopher Columbus came looking for a trade route to India, and this got in his way. Of course, this is why Columbus declared the people he found, the indigenous people he found, to be Indians, because he was convinced that he had found India. This could have something to do with syphilis, but that's a whole other story. Regardless, the discovery of the Americas brings the Europeans into exploration and colonization. Now, I'm not going to spend a great deal of time lecturing you about all the horrible things that the Europeans did to the indigenous populations of the Americas. You have all heard about that in agonizing detail, and for the record, everything you have heard is absolutely true. Yes, millions dead, disease outbreaks, ignorance, cruelty, you name it, it happened. For our purposes, though, there are two big things that happen in the Americas as the Europeans begin colonizing, abusing the native populations, etc. Number one, the Europeans are desperate to claim more territory in the Americas because whatever territory they claim, they get an economic boost from that. Whatever things are unique to that region, so coffee, tobacco, cotton, if you own the area in the Americas where that object, that trade good is produced, you have the right to sell it back in Europe, which means you have a new economic resource that you can use to benefit your country. The other big thing that is relevant for us in this class is the fact that the Americas are, in some cases, used as almost a parking spot, a prison colony, an exile for people who have religious or political views that are viewed as extreme. One of the countries that does this extensively is Great Britain. Great Britain finds themselves, in their view, plagued by a group of radical Protestants. Those radical Protestants are offered, air quotes, offered the opportunity to go to the Americas and establish a place where they can practice their beliefs more freely. The British encourage, again, big air quotes, many groups that they view as extremes or extremists or radicals to come to the Americas and settle. The British also use the Americas as a place where they have extra land that they can give as a reward to young nobles. So they give land to nobility, British nobility, and they chase away radical Protestants to this area owned by Britain in the Americas. Now, I know you're sitting there listening along, but think for just a minute. They are sending radical Protestants who believe passionately in education, and nobles who are most likely well educated. And they're parking them all in this place that is only accessible at this point in history by a ship, usually by at least a 3-month ship journey. You get a bunch of well-educated people far away from their government, they're going to begin talking, thinking, questioning. Some of them actually read the writings of a British philosopher that you should know about named John Locke. And when the British government makes them angry, they decide that maybe they should do something different than the British. Maybe they should not have a king. And I am assuming that you guys know that in 1776, in the British colonies, the colonists decide to declare independence from Great Britain. Now, this idea of declaring independence is deeply rooted in the ideas of John Locke. The idea that a king is basically about a person. It is a cult of personality, and they want nothing to do with that. Instead, like John Locke proposed, they want a government of laws. They believe that people have certain natural rights and that laws should protect the rights of the individual. They also believe in a government where power should remain in the hands of the governed, the hands of the people. Now, they put this down in their Declaration of Independence and then again in their Constitution. They want to create a country based on the ideas of John Locke, but they run into a problem. No one takes them seriously. You have to remember, this is not the way our world works today. But in the 1700s, almost every other country in the world was either a monarchy or a dictatorship. This whole idea of a democratic republic was absolutely radical, and most people thought it was insane. Most people thought that this was a crazy experiment, more of a social experiment than an actual country. No one took America seriously. And America desperately needed to be taken seriously. It couldn't establish itself with any kind of international credibility. It could not open trade negotiations. It could not get money and support for its wars without other countries taking it seriously. So, the newly founded United States of America desperately tries to give itself credibility and legitimacy by making a connection to the past. The Americans, these new United States citizens, realize and recognize that the Europeans' favorite thing is ancient Greece and Rome. I mean, from the Renaissance onward, everyone has been going back and talking about ancient Greece. There's been paintings, sculptures of all these people wandering around in togas. Everyone loves the ideas of ancient Greece and Rome. So these new founders of the United States immediately say, guys, we're not crazy. You know what we're doing? We're making a democratic republic. You know what the ancient Greeks had? They had a democracy. You know what the ancient Romans had? They had a republic. Guys, we're like them. You love the Greeks and the Romans. You should love us too. America desperately tries to make that connection back to the classical world, to Greece and Rome, to compare ourselves to those republics, those democracies from the past that the Europeans knew and loved, as a way of legitimizing the United States as an updated version of Greek and Roman ideals combined with the ideas of John Locke. Now, we do this not only in writing, we also do this in art. Sometimes it's very embarrassing and sometimes it's very awesome. Let me give you an example of both embarrassing and awesome. On the embarrassing side, no, guys, no, we're just like ancient Greece and Rome. Look, Zeus. Zeus was the father of the gods. You guys love paintings and sculptures of Zeus. Here is our great father of our nation, George Washington, as Zeus. Yeah, oh yeah, that's George in a toga. Yep. There you go. This sculpture generally is actually created for real as basically this attempt at connection back to ancient Greece and Rome. That is George Washington on a toga. He's pretty ripped. Who knew? Guys, this does not go over well. The whole idea of George Washington, father of the country, as Zeus, father of the gods, just it fails. It doesn't work in its own time period. It doesn't work today. But it is that same call. It's that attempt at a connection between ancient Greek and Roman ideals, democracy, republic, and our ideals. This is when it doesn't work. When it does is often in architecture. For example, a guy you might know by the name of Thomas Jefferson actually is commissioned to create the capital of the state of Virginia, where he resides. He decides to create a new government building, the capital of Virginia, in Richmond. However, he doesn't want to create a state capital that looks like other buildings of the time. At the time, in the 1770s and 1780s, the style of architecture, the kind of buildings that are being built, are called Georgian architecture, after King George, the King of England. Jefferson is not cool with doing that because, well, we just kicked King George out. In fact, Thomas Jefferson in his writings repeatedly insults him by calling him Fat King George. He is so not going to build a building in architecture that is dedicated to that guy. So, Thomas Jefferson actually sends his architects over to Greece and Rome. He sends them to the Mediterranean and has them tour these ancient buildings, the ruins of Greek temples and the Roman Forum. When they return, they actually build the Capitol building in Richmond, Virginia, in the style of the Parthenon, the Temple in Athens, in the style of the Senate in the Forum in Rome. They draw on the architectural styles of ancient Greece and Rome to associate us with that tradition, to give us legitimacy. You can see that the state capitol in Richmond is designed to emulate a Greco-Roman temple or government building. It has these big columns with the Ionic capitals at the top. It has a triangular pediment at the top. That triangular pediment here is above the doorway. It is this triangular shape up here at the very top. Now, this is started with Jefferson's government building, the state capitol at Richmond. But as you all know, this is not the last time you're going to see American government buildings do this. We love doing this. If you've seen video of DC, if you've been to DC, you know we are still using this reference to Greek and Roman architecture in our government buildings, in a way connecting ourselves back to ancient Greece and Rome. America does this so strongly at the beginning of our country because we want that legitimacy. We are trying to associate ourselves with Greek and Roman ideals, those ideas of freedom and personal liberty, to create a connection, to gain respect from our European counterparts, to get them to see us as a legitimate country instead of a social experiment. Interestingly enough, the country where this resonates most strongly, where it really works and catches on, is in France. The French are charmed and fascinated by the United States. There are many educated people in France, all those nobles that Louis is worried about. They are very well educated and they spend a great deal of time talking and discussing about the best way to run a country, about what is in theory a good political system. However, this is all theory. They are wealthy, powerful, and privileged. They don't actually want to make real changes that might inconvenience them. They live in that soft focus pastel Rococo world. But they are interested in the concept, the idea. So watching America experiment 3 months away across the ocean pleases them. They don't want to try something in their country, but they're more than glad to watch it in another country. This actually frustrates some of the less wealthy and privileged intellectuals who see this as an abuse. They look at how the ordinary people of France are being forced to live, and they get really frustrated. They get doubly frustrated, though, because the quote-unquote ordinary people of France are putting up with it. One of the guys who gets really frustrated with this is a writer and satirist, a guy who uses humor to poke fun at corruption, named Voltaire. Voltaire grows increasingly angry with the people of the country of France because he sees them as basically tolerating abuse by their own government. The people of France are not being treated particularly well. The king believes that he knows what's best for the country. He's an enlightened despot. He is doing what he thinks from a unrealistic, paternalistic point of view is best for the country. It isn't always. Sometimes it really hurts the people of France. But instead of standing up for themselves, instead of protesting, instead of fighting back against these abuses, the people of France are human beings and they tend to be a little bit lazy. We all do. Basically, they sit back and they say, yeah, well, the king's he did something stupid today. It sucks, but, it could be worse. We're just kind of going to be good with it. In fact, they have actually started using a catchphrase from a German philosopher that says, well, if you put it in 21st century terms, we would say it is what it is. Their catchphrase is, this is the best of all possible worlds. Basically, the way this is used, the attitude behind it, is that no matter what happens, just be grateful for what you got. It could be worse. I mean, this is the best of all possible worlds. It could be worse. Think of it this way. Let's say you're leaving a building, you go down a flight of stairs, and you trip, and you fall down the last 3 stairs. You twist your ankle, it hurts, but nothing worse. that idea, this is the best of all possible worlds, would say you should say, oh, thank goodness. Oh, that was great. What? Well, I didn't break my leg. I didn't fall and get a concussion. It could be so much worse. This is the best of all possible worlds. Now, you, me, and Voltaire are sitting here going, wait, you could have held on to the handrail? You could have prevented that. Your ankle hurts, doesn't it? Well, yes, but it could be so much worse. This is the best of all. Voltaire is desperately trying to get the people of France to get off their butts, to take responsibility, to not just sit back and let things happen, but to try to take action to improve their lives. Instead of screaming at them and telling them they're stupid, though, he instead tries to convince them to take action, to take responsibility through humor. He actually writes a book called Candide. Now, Candide is a humorous book. It is a satire. And in the book Candide, Voltaire writes a story about a very silly, very naive young man named Candide. In the book, Candide has a teacher, a guy who guides him, who is basically really into this idea of the best of all possible worlds. It is what it is. It could always be worse. Be grateful for what you have. The book starts with young Candide, the main character. His parents have been killed. They've died. He's an orphan. He's been taken in by a wealthy nobleman as kind of a charity case. And immediately right there, his teacher says, see, this is the best of all possible worlds. Yeah, your parents died, but hey, you have a nice place to stay. It's all good. Best of all possible worlds. It turns out Candide gets a crush on the daughter of the wealthy guy who's taken him in, but he gets caught. The two of them get caught making out. And Candide gets thrown out of the house for, trying to make time with someone above him. And Candide doesn't know what to do. He's got nothing. His teacher says, don't worry about it. It'll work out. Best of all possible worlds. Candide goes wandering around, goes to a local bar and restaurant, stands around looking helpless because he's got no money. Nice guy comes up to him and says, hey, kid, what's your name? Candide. I'll get you a meal. I've got a job. I'm recruiting for job. I'll give you 3 steady meals, regular work. All you got to do is sign this paper. Candide signs. The guy buys him dinner. He takes him, gives him a nice tent to stay in, introduces him to some other guys. Candide thinks this isn't bad. His teacher says, see, it all worked out. All you had to do was just accept and go with it. I told you it would work out. Candide is awakened in the morning by a lot of noise. He goes back to sleep. When he gets out of the tent in the morning, all those nice guys he was introduced to yesterday are dead. Guys, the guy's a military recruiter. He recruits Candide, but Candide is too dumb to realize he's been recruited into the military, and he sleeps through a firefight. He ends up wandering away in confusion and is arrested for desertion. He's put in jail, but before he can go on trial or be executed, I kid you not, in the book, a meteor hits the jail. Candide gets out. His teacher's like, see, you just hung out, you just waited, and it all worked out. Best of all possible. I mean, the whole book reads like a badly written Monty Python sketch. It's ridiculous. These awful, stupid things. And every time, his teacher's just like, don't worry about it, man. Just go with it. It's good. Best of all possible worlds. In the end, Candide finally finds the girl that he had a crush on in the first place. The problem is her father threw her out of the house too, and she was forced into prostitution, but she contracted a venereal disease and she's blind, so she doesn't realize that her skin is all pockmarked and she's been disfigured by the disease. But see, she can't see, she's blind, so it's okay. Best of all possible worlds. In the end, Candide and his disfigured but blind girlfriend end up going back to her father's house. They inherit it. See, it worked out. And after discussion, the two of them decide their lives would have been so much better if instead of just sitting back and just accepting, they tried to change their lives, if they'd taken responsibility. And in the end, Candide decides that from now on he has to cultivate his own garden. Now, that may not sound like much, but that's Voltaire's punchline, guys. Voltaire's point is that if you want a good life, if you want things to go well, you can't just sit back and say, nah, it's okay, it'll work out, best of all possible worlds. You have to go out there and try to change your life. You've got to try to make things better. You've got to try to take responsibility. You must cultivate your own garden if you want your life to bear fruit. Now, for better or worse, Candide does not really make the people of France change what they're doing. One book is not going to change the world. For that, it takes a food shortage. Sure enough, under the rule of Louis XIV's grandson, Louis XVI. So Louis XIV dies, there's Louis XV. Louis XV dies, Louis XVI, Louis XIV's grandson. There is a severe food shortage. This food shortage comes about partially because of the bad decisions that Louis XIV, the current king's grandfather, made, starting those wars, enlightened despot, Sun King, doing what he thought was right for his people. He actually causes a major economic crisis, which results in famine. The current king, Louis XVI, has no idea what to do. Not because he's mean, not because he wants to hurt people, but because there is a complete lack of understanding. He's never had, for him, a food shortage means he only has 3 courses for dinner instead of 6. They have no clue what life is like for ordinary people. There's a complete lack of understanding, and therefore, when these people who are starving, who are dying, who are struggling, look to their government for assistance, their government does not help them because the government does not understand what they're going through. This makes a lot of hangry people. And finally, those people are hungry, disenfranchised, and angry enough to finally do something, to stop believing this is the best of all possible worlds. And in 1789, that powder keg of hangry, disenfranchised people who watched what happened in America as the colonists rebelled against the British government decide it's their turn. And in 1789, a revolution breaks out in France.